Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sapphire Nation podcast for February 2022. I'm your host, Sapphire Ed, and joining me for this podcast is Andrew Leibman from Fractal Design. Andrew, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Ed, for having me.
It's always fun to talk to you, Andrew. There aren't too many of us real old school PC gamers anymore.
No, we're a dying breed, I guess.
It's literally right. We're all old and we're dying. So you work for Fractal Design. Let's tell everybody what it is you do at Fractal Design.
Yes, so I am a marketing manager at Fractal Design, and that basically boils down to I'm the regional manager for North America. So I handle just about all aspects of the marketing that go through the U.S. and Canada.
Well, that sounds like fun. And I know how that goes because I do a lot of this in North America. So
Right. We commiserate often.
we do. We have cried together many times, in person even, cried together many times over lots of bottles of booze. Oops, I wasn't supposed to say that. Your wife didn't know about that.
Oh,
So, and last time I think we really got together was when we had pizza that one night.
Oh yes, in Omaha, right before a net war. Was a
That's
good time.
coming up, in fact.
Have you traveled since then?
I have, yes, I did the last land war before COVID got started. I got people trying to call me. See, they're trying to call into the show already. Holy cow. That's the wrong number. You want to call BR549. And got people trying to call me. Got to turn off my phone. I got to travel for that. And then after that, everything's been kind of locked down. We had an opportunity to travel to a Million Man event.
Okay.
We decided not to go. I was still in recovery from my health issues.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided that it was safer. I didn't go for it. Then we had the opportunity. Then they did a net war that fall.
Yes.
And again, still in the recovery and everything else going on. So we decided not to try that. Then this year in January, we had hoped to attend Land War. And at the last second, they had to cancel it because of the COVID spikes.
Right.
So hopefully this all calms down. I'm hoping this summer is when I'll finally get to start traveling again to events.
Okay. Cool.
As long as they don't make me go to LA, I don't care. Well, you've been there. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I was actually in LA for the E3 where the LA Lakers won the championship, and there was rioting right down the street from my hotel.
Isn't that amazing?
They lit a car on fire. They were so happy they set a car on fire.
It's amazing. The rest of the country, when your team wins, we celebrate by being happy and cheerful. And in LA, let's see what kind of violence we can cause. You wonder why teams stay in LA, but that's another story. Okay, so Fractal, for those of you that don't know, and if you don't know, what rock have you lived under? Fractal's a company that makes, mostly they're known for their case designs. Now, they've got AIOs, they've also got power supply, but cases are their bread and butter. And I think the simplest way to describe Fractal, and the way I've described the case designs from Fractal for years, elegance of simplicity. What do you think of that phrase?
I think that's pretty good. And you've avoided using the M word, which minimalism is the word that gets, I think, attached to every design of every case. We put the M word on our marketing material. We're actually struggling to kind of like come up with new ways to say it's minimalist, but also modular, which, in some people's minds, you have to do some mental gymnastics to get around how something can be minimalist and be everything that you want it to be.
Well, you'd be surprised how easy that is to me. It makes sense to me. I think people get too caught up in trying to be everything and do everything. Mm-hmm. And if you try to do everything, what's the saying? Um, I'm a
Jack of all,
jack of all trades, master of none,
master of none. Yeah.
and that kind of fits. I remember your predecessor Josh, and I was still doing radio when we did this interview. It freaked him out, and it freaked out my cohort Doug, my co-host. I'm talking to Josh, and we're talking about fractal design cases, and he said, now I think I'm going to say this right. He said we take the Swedish design philosophy
Hmm.
in designing cases. And I just deadpan said, live on the air, by the way, oh, so big, buxom, blonde women. And, and Josh, of course, didn't know how to react to that.
I'm actually surprised. Maybe he was struggling with a PC way or a gentle way of responding. Josh is usually pretty quick on the trigger.
Oh, that was 10 years ago. We
Yeah.
didn't have to be gentle back then.
That's true. That's true.
So you've got a couple of new cases out.
Indeed, we do.
One of them that's got me interested because you just sent me. Why don't you tell everybody about the case? I'll let you tell everybody about the case.
Yeah. So it's about 2.5 weeks ago we launched the two new members of the Torrent family, the Torrent Compact and the Torrent Nano. The Torrent Compact is still an ATX size case. However, it's shrunk down. It's a little bit shorter. It's a little bit narrower. And so it still has those two big one. So I guess for those who don't know, the Torrent family for Fractal Design is we kind of wanted to make a case that was just really excellent airflow, like no compromise airflow. From the front to the back, we kind of like decide this is going to be the ideal airflow direction is front to back. And how do we do that the best that we can? How can we optimize that actual airflow path? And so with the original Torrent, we kind of like went back to square one and we realized that, okay, we're going to have to move the power supply up to the top because we want our graphics card to get plenty of airflow. We want fans in the front. We want fans in the bottom. We want a big open back. And just kind of try to get as much airflow through this thing. And so, yeah, we came up with a Torrent design, and people loved it. Actually, it kind of blew us away. It became our best-selling case, frankly, since the Meshify.
Well, it's like an evolved Meshify.
Well, careful, because that's what we call the Meshify 2.
Well, the purpose of the Meshify was to give great airflow.
Right.
And this just took it to a new level.
Yeah. And so it's interesting because the Meshify was really the original Meshify, or the Meshify C, was kind of groundbreaking at the time when it came out because there really wasn't a whole lot of, like, you had mesh fronted cases, but it was kind of a marriage of, well, like, so it had that front filter in there, and it had good airflow, and it had an attractive design, and it just kind of hit a lot of people's priorities when they were looking for and it was affordable.
Well, the affordable was the key. I'm going to call you out though on the groundbreaking. At the time, it was because everybody had moved to tempered glass on the front.
Yeah,
there was this huge movement, which to me was dumb, to solid front panels.
Yeah.
But no, it's interesting to see this. And then now you sent me a Nano because you know I like small form factor builds.
Mm-hmm.
How successful are the small form factor cases for Fractal? I don't want you to give exact numbers, but just to let people understand what that market is.
Well, the compact form factor, which is not small form factor. When we say Fractal's definition of a compact case is still full ATX motherboards, but not a heck of a lot more room than that. So those are, by and large, our most popular. But then from there, like the Define Nano S and those nano size cases, they are very popular. I not know that because we haven't released an ITX case, well, since the era. But we are actually going to be it's not something we've forgotten about. It's definitely a market
Well,
that
we
we
don't
are.
want to discuss that previous model because that which shall not be named.
Well, maybe we do actually. I'm one of those old school guys who's like, our a failure is, and I don't want to make any bones about it, that there were some oversights in that case that honestly, if you're not running a graphics card, it's great and people love it. And there are actually regions of this world where we can't keep that case in stock.
It's a
It's
beautiful
not in the
case.
US. But so yeah, I mean it had issues, but we're trust me, it's not, we are learning from that. And that's what I think is really interesting. Um, so we actually, to go back to the Meshify C, I think I can tell this story because I might get in trouble, but who knows? So the Meshify C, which did really well for us. I mean, I mentioned it was kind of groundbreaking at the time, but for sure we got surpassed by our competitors while it was on the market. I mean, a lot of people kind of picked up that baton, that front
Yep.
airflow all mesh fronted cases, and they kind of realized, okay, so this front panel has some issues, and I won't mention them by name, but there was a CES where one of our competitors very cleverly showed up to CES, and they had different samples of mesh fronted cases with a fan, and then they had they were testing airflow through this front filter, and they had brand A, brand B, and brand F. And interestingly enough, brand F had this little triangle pattern on the the metal mesh. So
Yeah,
it
there
was
was no
a
attempt to hide who that was.
not so subtle slam at us. But, and of course, brand F performed poorly, because what ended up being the issue is the original Meshify C has a foam filter, and it's a rather dense filter,
Yeah,
and it's
I hate foam filters.
and well, I mean, they're really great at collecting dust because air will hit it and it'll have to divert it. Those little cells, they're kind of randomly placed, and air diverts, so it's really good at collecting dust. And that's one of those things that this company, we as we kind of understand that people don't clean their PCs as much as they should, so we try to help them out. We try to build our
Right.
cases so that you don't have to disassemble it and actually get in there with an air gun every 6 months. So that was kind of, we kind of like, that was the we were willing to make at the time. So anyway, it didn't perform that great, and they showed in numbers kind of how poorly that front panel design worked. Um, So when we went back to design the Meshify 2, we looked at that experience that our competitor put in front of all of the media, and we're like, okay, this is actually good. This is like, this does a lot of work for us. And so we went back and completely redesigned the front panel of the Meshify 2, and then when that case launched, it was 10 times better because of that experience. So, I think I always keep that in the back of my mind, is like, if you make a mistake, or if you come up with a design that doesn't work as well as it did on paper or as you expected it to, then, don't shirk from that. Don't hide from that. That's something you need to build into your design and learn. And I mean, frankly, the Torrent case is one of those cases where we learned a lot, and we were building on previous knowledge that came from those experiences. And like, if you look at the front of your Nano, that grill is super deep. It's like
It is.
those ribs are like 3/4 of an inch thick, and that is by design. That is to get those fans in the front access to as much air as possible with almost zero resistance. So yeah,
It's a nice case. I'm enjoying building it. It's funny to me. The small form factor market. I actually did an article on Sapphire Nation about this years ago. There's essentially, and I think now we're to the point, it's like 4 different levels of ITX. Okay, you have what I call max ITX. And this case fits that. Okay, this is
Yeah, right.
it's limited to an ITX motherboard, but it's close to a mid tower in full size.
Hmm.
Okay, but it's super easy to build in. You don't have to get specialized parts for the most part. You can pretty much build anything you want in one of these cases. The next level I just called ITX because this is the beginning of small form factor. This is down around that 20-liter size,
Hmm.
20 to 15 liters. You can still fit a really well-built PC in it, but now you got to get a little specialized. You're going to have an SFX power supply. You're not going to have the brute force fan approach that a bigger case has, where you can just move a ton of air. You have to direct the airflow. Then you've got mini ITX, which is, well, it might fit a video card, but it's going to have to be tiny. You know what I mean? The half height and maybe one slot cards. And then you have the I guess micro ITX that won't even fit a video card.
Yeah.
But it's fun to me to watch this because when I got excited about small form factor building, it was still really niche. And now I don't think I can go to Reddit without seeing at least 20 posts every day. Hey, just built my first PC, and they're showing small form factor build.
Yeah.
It's very cool to see this explode. Um, speaking of the smaller cases with the directed airflow, because you're old school like me, I get a real kick out of this because we see the industry as a whole. It does this. History repeats itself.
Hmm.
And so we go back to case design and the early cases back in the day when we were young. Get off my lawn. Back in the day of the any color you want as long as it's beige. Cases used really directed airflow. And what I mean by that is I think the best example is cases used to have this hole on the side. And you could put a fan there, but you didn't need to put a fan there. But it had this like expanding cup vent.
I have one of those
And
stuck in a box somewhere.
and what most people don't realize is that was done on purpose for a reason. That was meant to be pulled down as close to the CPU cooler as it could get. That hole was always right over the CPU.
Yep.
And it allowed the CPU to draw direct cool air from the outside and just cool everything by doing that. And when I look at small form factor today, that's what I see a lot of. Now, what I like about your case is, even though it doesn't have as much directed airflow, it's got so much open airflow, and you allow a full-size tower cooler to be efficient. In this case, it can be very efficient because that front intake will just feed that beast. It'll give it all it can take, and your bottom's got enough lift. You could put a couple of small fans down there and easily feed a video card.
Yep.
It's like I said, it's a fun case to build it. I'm enjoying it. I've got some plans for it. I'm putting together some ideas.
Are you going to put a handle on the top?
No, I am not going to put it. You could. It's a little big. It's a little big for a travel case. But I do think it makes a great case for somebody that's not going to travel with it, because it's small enough it can fit on your desk. It doesn't have to go. God, remember those? You had to put cases under your desk.
Yeah.
Half the time they were the desk leg. They were so big, and you had to put the cases under your desk, and people had no sense of small cases back then. Remember, Thermaltake made a case called the Speedo, and you and I think Speedo when we're thinking these little bitty pieces of underwear that barely cover anything for a guy for a swimsuit, and they made this case that was massive and called it the Speedo.
The biggest Thermaltake case that I remember working with was the Sword M. I don't know if you remember.
I do remember that.
It had gas pistons on the side panel, and they were billet aluminum milled side panels.
Yeah, there were some monstrous cases back in the day.
And it came on wheels, of course.
Well, you had to. Well, it was really popular back then. The little they called them CPU stands. That's not accurate, but you get what I mean. But it was just basically it was a little platform with casters.
Yep. They still sell those, actually.
And that was you had to have those because if you needed to move the computer around. But I was going to ask you this anyway. It's interesting you comment about the filtering because you got to keep the PC clean. This is one of the reasons, and you and I have had this discussion. I love open air builds.
Mm-hmm. I have a cat. I keep telling you, man, I can't have.
Well, no, I understand you can't. But what I love about an open air build is, and I've got one sitting behind me. I can take a can of compressed air, turn off the PC. 30 seconds later, I'm turning it back on, and it's perfectly cleaned.
And the inside of your lungs are coated with dust.
The inside of my lungs are not coated with dust. I wear a mask because I don't want to catch COVID from my PC. COVID can become a computer virus. No, I'm just, I understand what's going to happen, so I wear a mask when I do it. Because people always ditz on open air builds. They get all the dust in them, and they really don't do as bad as you'd think. Yeah. Has Fractal ever looked at doing an open air chassis?
Have we ever? I couldn't tell you if we have ever. It is one of those things where I kind of question how big the market for them is. I come from so prior to my job at Fractal, I suppose I should have given a little bit of information about my history here. I was a writer for CPU Magazine and a handful
that's
of
how we met.
Magazines, right? For 14 years. So I've been with Fractal for 3, but 14 years before that, I was a hardware reviewer. I forgot what we were talking
about. We were talking about open air.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. So as coming from the world of hardware reviews, I used test benches all the time, and everyone I knew had a test bench. Yeah. And there's some really neat ones out there. But with an open air build, I kind of personally don't know how popular with just the general population is. Like when you go to a LAN party, they're very few and far between.
They're difficult to transport.
Yeah,
I mean that's because I've got an ex-proto build. That I was going to use at the event in January, but we didn't get to go. We actually bought a Pelican case so that I could properly protect it to transport it. It's difficult.
You had to buy a case for your case.
Yeah, it's funny, ain't it?
So another tricky thing about when I worked for the computing magazines, this is for those of you who don't know, CPU Magazine and all the magazines that we worked for, it was a little bit of a different company, but they made us wear suits and ties.
Yeah, that was funny.
So it happened more than once. Leaning over an open air computer build with a tie on,
I can imagine
can be a problem. I have many frayed ties that I haven't thrown away for some stupid reason. But
I used to give Andrew, and I can't remember who came with you all those times out to PDX land.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I used to give them constant grief about, guys, get rid of the tie. Come on.
You were the only one. It's so weird.
Well, I wanted you to relax and play games with me and have fun.
Oh, I did.
You did. You did.
The tie. Yeah.
With the tie.
See, and, he was PDX land. Usually, I'm in party mode when you put the tie on the top of your head and you just ramble it. That's like 7 monsters into the evening.
It was always funny though, because you guys are walking around and you're not really there with a booth or anything. You gave a bunch of magazines and now you're walking around and you're still wearing the ties, and we're like, come on guys, relax, enjoy the game. I get it. I understand being required to, but it was just funny at the time to me. It was just hilarious.
Yes.
So anyway, what about the future cases? I don't want you to give away any Fractal secrets. Okay, yes, we do. We want you to give away Fractal secrets. You're not going to do that. That's all right. But what about
I knew some Fractal secrets.
What about the future? Where cases
anybody has
headed?
Fractal secrets, email me.
Where do you see cases headed in the future?
I do see this bigger trend towards smaller. However, so it's interesting that we were just talking about this trend towards cases that are getting smaller, and there are YouTube channels that specialize in small cases only.
Yeah, what's
Um,
Optimus? Optimum?
the Optimum Tech.
Yeah, Optimum Tech, and then of course Josh Sniffen
Yep,
with
yep.
everything he does is he's like the small form factor guru.
Dimitri from Hardware Canucks
Yeah,
tends
Dimitri's
to.
done some.
He loves a lot of the smaller form factor stuff.
I'd like to see him get to do more. It feels like he gets pulled back to the bigger stuff.
Well, so to lead into that, and I hear this a lot on these channels that kind of focus on the small form factor stuff. They say things like, "I don't understand why anyone would ever buy a larger case. It just doesn't. You don't need it. It's too much space, and it's just unnecessary." And to a point, I agree with that. However, with Meshify 2, we and the Define 7 actually, we launched the XL versions.
Uh-huh.
And this is, we were just talking about cases with wheels. When we launched our Define 7 XL, and I sent one to Wendell from Level 1 Techs, the first thing he did was print little feet on it that you could put chair wheels onto.
Nice.
So he 3D printed some of those and then sent me the STL so I could put some wheels on my Define 7 XL as well. But those cases actually sold surprisingly well. It kind of blew us away how well those XL cases sold. We did not expect a whole lot of people. And the reason we even made it to begin with is because we had the Define R2 case, which was, man, that was before my time. And it was kind of our original Define case made extra big. And the kind of key was you could put, 10 mechanical hard drives into it. So for the Define 7 XL and a Meshify 2 XL, we just kind of went nuts and said, how many hard drives can we fit? I think Linus managed to fit 17 into one of them.
Yeah. I remember that.
So yeah, I mean those large cases, there are definitely a lot of people who are doing this home server stuff. They are not afraid of these big cases and they love them. So if you manage to make a big case well, it'll sell.
Well, I think the problem is people don't do clear definitions anymore. So if I'm building a computer that's solely for gaming, like the computer I have sitting next to me, it's solely for gaming. That's its purpose. I don't need anything bigger than a small form factor case. I run 2 NVMe drives, I run a video card, a microprocessor, and a power supply, and that's it inside that case. There isn't anything else I need inside the case. And I don't run a ton of external devices on it. I've got a USB hub if I need to plug in an external hard drive. I've got my keyboard, my mouse, my headset, my microphone, my monitor, and my webcam, and I'm done. So there's no need for a pure gamer, I believe, to have a bigger case. But most people aren't pure gamers. Most people maybe they need a server at home. Maybe they do a ton of work and they need storage space. Maybe they're maybe they're one of these people that just love to I don't know, beat themselves with whips, so they like to water cool. And no, I'll tell you how I really feel about water cooling. You know that.
See that, yes.
And there definitely is a need in the market for both.
Mm-hmm.
There really is. What does surprise me though is I'm surprised full towers have stayed as relevant as they have. I really expected to see those fall away to the mid tower.
Mm-hmm.
So you're seeing cases get smaller.
Yeah.
What about liquid cooling versus air cooling? Are we starting to see the movement back to air cooling?
No, I think what is happening is, so liquid cooling, and I'm including like all-in-ones into that. You've basically simplified liquid cooling so that from a perspective it's just as good as, or just as easy to use as an air cooler. There's no maintenance difference between installing an AIO and installing an air cooler, you still have metal fins
Right.
doing the actual cooling heavy lifting. Do you disagree?
No, I don't disagree.
Okay.
I agree with you. From a maintenance viewpoint, they're identical.
Right. But I think what is happening is, so computing is one of those industries and hobbies that is constantly getting new people. I mean, this between 17 years ago when I started in this industry and now, I believe, it's my belief that this hobby, this industry is bigger than it's ever been. And it's getting bigger. It's continuing to grow. That's kind of my thought. I think this graphics card shortage has kind of slowed things a bit, but
Definitely.
I don't think it's stopped it. So anyway, what is happening is new people are continually coming in, and these new people tend to get kind of freaked out about water coursing through tubes inside of a computer, and you can tell them, oh, it's fine and nothing's gonna happen, but you pull up, Reddit r/hardware, and it's super easy to find people who are like, this is what happened, and it was terrible, and I had water spraying out of my computer, and everything blew up. So I understand, like, being freaked out. The first time I built a computer, it freaked me out, and it's you spend all this hard-earned money, and it's like it can be kind of an expensive hobby. You don't want to be worried about that, So I think air cooling will always be around for those people, not only those people, of course, but for those newer people who are just a little bit worried. Air cooling is going to be their thing. I think as you get more into it, you tend to be more open to the water cooling stuff. So I kind of wonder if we've reached an equilibrium where air cooling is going to be here for good, and so is water cooling and AIOs. You're going to have the custom stuff because as people get more into the hobby, they get more creative and performance minded. It's kind of a mix of the two. So I kind of feel like we've reached an equilibrium. Newer computer builders are going to kind of gravitate toward the air cooling, whereas more veteran people are going to move more toward the liquid stuff. So,
by the way, Andrew, if you haven't looked yet, there's a listener question chat channel above the podcast channel. That's where they're posting questions, and Breaking Dimes has literally typed in an entire show segment for us in questions. Now, to what you just said, I'm going to partially disagree with you. I've been doing this a long time, and I've built air, and I've built liquid, and I've built AIOs. To me, at this point in my journey in building computers, AIOs to me feel like the lazy way out. And what I mean by that is this. You can take, and I've proven this, you can take an air cooler, and if you properly configure it, and what I mean by properly is you make sure you buy the right case for your cooler. You make sure you position the fan so they put the air where it needs to go. You use proper airflow positioning, proper case selection. I took a Ryzen 9 9700. No, it's not. Am I using the right number?
No, 9's.
No, 5900. Okay, I'm sorry. God, I don't. Too many numbers, too many models, too many.
Yeah.
So I took a 5900, which is, nobody claims it's a non cooling chip. It's got to have some cooling to be effective. AMD recommends a liquid cooler. I took a $50 air cooler and I put it on there, but because I used the right positioning, the right case, the right direction of airflow, I still never break 65 to 68 C under any gaming load with that chip. I have no trouble at all, and I'm running it with optimizations. It's getting about 200 megahertz over stock, and it's more than capable. And the funny thing is, it's silent. Now, by silent, let's be clear, silent isn't really silent. Unless you've got no fans anywhere in a computer, it can't be silent. Let's just make sure we say that. By silent, what I mean is this: at 4 a.m, when everybody else is asleep, and nothing is running in the house. You know that quiet time where the house is just eerily quiet? I can hear the crickets outside more than I can hear my computer in gaming.
Yeah.
It can be done with air cooling.
Yeah.
AIOs gave you a lazy out. Custom loops used to be because we needed the cooling and we couldn't get it from other solutions. And we needed quiet and we couldn't get it from other solutions. That was the original idea behind the whole custom cooling thing. And then you added overclocking, and that just took everything to a new level. And AIOs, like you said, tried to bridge the gap. They tried to be the in-between, the simplified version. And I think they've achieved that. But at this point in my journey, I'm looking back, I don't overclock anymore. There's no need. I can run any game I want right now at 1440p at 100 plus frames per second. Why do I need to overclock? Every game is smooth. The system is quiet. And I can do it without any form of liquid cooling. That's why I did this. Stepped away from the liquid cooling approach. Plus, it's just simpler and cheaper. I mean, a good AIO, you're going to pay for a 240, 80, 90 bucks for a good AIO for a 240. I'm buying coolers for $50 that get all the job done I need.
I was just going to ask you what air cooler you had on your 5900.
A Scythe Big Shuriken 3.
Is that a downdraft?
That's a downdraft. But this is in, okay, I'm sorry. This is in a small form factor case that has a side intake fan right above the downdraft cooler. So I've got a 120 millimeter fan on that side panel set at like 40%. So it's getting about 900 RPM. And that is blasting external cool air right into that cooler. And because of the setup, because of the way the setup works, downdraft coolers in this setup with this particular style of case can punch way above their weight class. You can actually get a Wraith Prism can actually be quiet in this with a 5600 at full load.
That Wraith Prism, I have like half a dozen Wraith Prisms just sprinkled around my office.
Yeah.
I use a lot of AIOs. And I took one of the Wraith Prisms and I took the cable apart so that I could I wanted to break it away from the proprietary RGB connection so I could actually plug it into an ARGB port. And so I isolated that, and I can plug that fan into and give it 12 volts. That fan will scoot across my desk. It is powerful, and it can at full speed. That fan gets scary with how loud it is. But yeah, I mean, I love the Wraith Prism. I also love the way it looks.
It looks pretty. It's just loud.
Yeah, it can be.
It's just loud. But if you've got a downdraft cooler, and this is the key, okay? So if you're going to build in a case like yours with the Torrent, that case is designed and works wonderful with a tower cooler.
Right.
Because you can take that front air intake, that cool direct air, and feed that beast on that tower cooler.
Yeah.
A downdraft cooler has a problem. It's catching the air at a 90-degree angle, and when you have to bend the airflow, you reduce it drastically.
Yeah.
And you're only going to get a portion of it because your exhaust fan's yanking it the other way. The exhaust fan from the PSU is yanking it the other way. You're going to get this air is going to be, it's not going to be efficient with the way it does. But if you can take a downdraft cooler where you've got a case design that allows you to put that fan that blows straight down into it, oh my God, they're amazing. They're
part of... Go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, that was part of the design philosophy with the Torrent, specifically the Nano. And you mentioned it is on the larger side. Would you call it ITX Max or something like that? Yeah.
That's coined now and copywritten if anybody wants to use.
So we did and not that I'm saying that downdraft coolers are somehow like an ITX specific sort of a thing. you can get tower coolers just as cheap as you can get downdraft coolers.
Yes, you can.
Breaking Dimes mentioned the Hyper 212. That's
Vitro
extremely
V5.
Yeah, the Vetro V5 that J2 Sense was
Yeah.
outing a little while back. Super cheap. You can get those. I mean, you can get them almost. I mean, we were just talking about the Wraith Prism. You could replace the Wraith Prism and maybe get a little bit better performance, but not a whole lot. But
Just a little less noise.
Tower coolers is what the Torrent was built for.
Yes.
I agree with you there. And that's why we didn't shrink it front or side to side at all. We tried to keep. We basically looked at the tallest tower coolers that we could find and said we want to make sure that those all could fit. And that was by design. Once you're getting into downdraft coolers, if you want to, it's important to, I think, and as you said that you're a big fan of these smaller cases. Once you go towards a downdraft cooler, you're cutting the height of that cooler at least in half.
Oh, at least, yes.
And so if you've got all that extra room, it's just pointless. There are people who look at like the Meshify 2, for instance, and they're like, "Why this thing is so big? It's just pointless." Like, well, it's big because a lot of people who buy that case tend to want to do liquid cooling and custom loops. And there's space for multiple radiators on the top, on the front, and even on the back, and even in the bottom. And you've got room for a reservoir, and stuff like that. So once you start thinking about, okay, we want to build a case and have a plan for where we want air to go. If we're going to plan around building a case that is going to be optimized for downdraft coolers, well, we're going to be able to shrink it, but we're going to also have to shrink the power supply.
Yep.
And we're going to also have to make compromises. Well, then you're probably not going to be able to fit a radiator that's 122, 123 millimeters wide in the front or the top or the back. So it does limit a lot of things. And
well, it's all about choices.
Right, exactly. And so what we with the Torrent, we wanted to make it as easy as possible to not worry about any of the ITX stuff. Like, you got the ITX motherboard, that's really the only ITX thing you got to worry about in the Torrent Nano. You can use your full-size power supply, you can use full-size hard drives,
graphics card,
all this stuff. The biggest graphics card you want. And then what we'll have happen is, and this is already happening, we'll have people who bought the Torrent Nano and they're going to do a full custom loop water cooling build in it, just because they like the challenge. So I love seeing that stuff.
It's big enough that you should be able to do that. Okay.
Yeah.
But
so I mean, I think anytime we build a case, airflow planning is like almost the first thing that happens. Like, we try to figure out what this case is going to be best at and how air is going to move from one place to the next. And we try to plan for that. And it ends up at the end of the day, when you've got this case, there are components that fit in it that are better optimized for the case that we've designed than others. So you're definitely correct about the tower cooler in the Torrent.
I think it's really interesting that most people, when they buy a case today, don't do this kind of research. They don't look at, okay, this is what I want to build. This is what I want to go for. And they go out and they go, oh, this case is said to be the best. I'm going to buy it. But they don't look at what they wanted to do with the cooler. They don't look at how they wanted to design the build. And it feels like we've gotten to the point of just check boxes on stuff. Like, for example, RGB. I don't understand it. I don't get it. Okay. Okay. Let me rephrase that. I get it. I just.
Why does Sapphire sell RGB cards then, Ed?
Well, because the demand is there.
It is. It really is.
That's the only reason. I mean, let's be honest. This is why. Okay, I get flack for this. Everybody's like, well, why do you keep saying you like the Pulse better than the Nitro Plus? I like the Pulse better because of design. I'm not a huge fan of RGB. My computers that I keep at home that are used for me, I don't put lights in. Okay, I don't even want glass side panels if I can avoid it. I just want a computer that's cool and quiet and stable. That's all I care about. I don't, I use this joke all the time. I don't set my computer up to stare longingly deep at night into its parts because I'm not that close to my PC. And it's just, so what about you with case design? Is RGB something that's just we're stuck with? It's never going away.
As long as many people buy it, it's here to stay. I remember, I want to say it was back when we launched the Vector, and that was our first case that had like integrated RGB. It had like a light strip that went across the front and across the top of the case. There were a lot of people who were like, "Fractal, you were the chosen one. Why did you betray us?" So we were kind of late to the RGB phenomenon, but it is definitely not going away. Our best-selling Torrent is the RGB one, even though it's the most expensive one that we make. Because those 180, I think each one of those 180 millimeter RGB fans is like 40 or $40, I think.
You know what I really hate about RGB? Yeah, like I haven't said it yet, right? First, I hate the lack of a standard. Give me a standard for control.
Yeah, agreed.
There doesn't need to be 30 different control things. The second thing I hate is this. If I'm going to use RGB, and I do use RGB in show builds, but when I do RGB, I go full unicorn puke, okay? I want every color on the rainbow displayed 40 times in chase and wave patterns everywhere. Why is it that I cannot buy an RGB fan that if I don't plug in the RGB controller, it's just going to set to that pattern and run? You know what I mean? If I plug it into power, the power is going to turn on that RGB, and that's what you're going to get is a rainbow puke. No pattern, no trying to control it. It's just going to be rainbow puke everywhere. Why can't I have that? Why is that so hard to do?
So you're saying you want the rainbow puke?
Yes. If I'm going to buy an RGB fan, I want rainbow puke. I don't want to have a controller to make it do that.
Oh. See, I'm of a different mind about it. I think this is a problem with marketing of these components. So you have an RGB fan that can do all these amazing colors. How do you show that in a still photo? Well, you take a static shot of rainbow puke.
Right.
And you're like, look at all the colors. And then people are supposed to see that and go, oh, my shade of blue-green is right there. I'm going to pick that one for mine. And they go home and they install all their fans and they set it to blue-green. That's kind of my thought about it. That's how I do it. Or maybe like the two colors.
I know a lot of people that do that.
And I agree with Breaking Dimes that RGB software is just terrible.
It's awful.
MSIs, gigabytes, ASRoCs.
It's not just theirs. When you get into peripherals, to me, it gets even worse. One of the things we did with the Trix software, and I love that we did this, by the way. I constantly praise our software guys for this. It's set and forget. Mm-hmm. So I can go into Trix, turn on Trix, set up the RGB, the coloring I want, turn off Trix and never load Trix again, but the card remembers it.
Yeah,
and it stays there.
That's pretty cool.
And I hate this in peripherals, that I'll get a peripheral, and again, we're back to they won't leave rainbow puke as default. You turn it on, and it defaults to like a single color that's their color. Okay, I get that for marketing. But I set rainbow puke up for the peripheral, and then I got to leave their software constantly running in the background to keep rainbow puke because they didn't want to spend the 25 cents to put a memory chip in that.
I think your problem is you're spending way too much money on your RGB fans. There are some bottom dollar RGB fans that are just rainbow puke, and you don't even get the option.
That's what I want, baby.
And you get them like $3 a pop.
Send me some
So-
links. Send me some links.
I mean, they may die after 6 months, but
Well, for $3, I'm okay with that. As
like
long
a
as they
jet
work
taking off.
okay and they're quiet, I don't care.
Oh, now there you go. You can't.
Oh,
have
you see,
both.
I can't have everything. I can't have
No.
quiet puke RGB at the same time without having to suffer trashy software.
Indeed.
That's terrible. That's
Yeah.
awful.
So, with our RGB fans, we've designed them so that the default RGB pattern is we have a name for it. I don't even know that we've really talked much about it because it's hard to talk about a color scheme and not sound stupid. But so it's called Northern Lights, right? It's kind of it's a blue, green, purple kind of cycling sort
I
of
understand. I
gentle
understand the pattern you're
flow.
talking about. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's kind of pretty.
it's all right.
I've always liked. I'm not. I tend not to be a big fan of white builds. Because I like my build to disappear on my desk, and a good white build doesn't do that unless you
Darn, I
built.
sent you a white one, didn't I?
Yeah, you sent me a white one. But if you do a white build, what I've always liked is that really light, almost electric blue, and then you create kind of a frost theme to the entire PC. I've never gotten the pure white. I don't see the appeal there. But again, that's preferences. That's the one thing about RGB that I do like. It lets you pick what you want. So there we go. All right. Well, we've covered pretty much everything then on cases and all that. How did the supply shortages really affect the case market much?
Yeah, I really think it's affected just about everybody in this industry. So there was, I want to say it was the 2020 was a particularly rough year that we did all right. We actually managed to do quite well because we it was kind of a fluke. We managed to get ahead of the supply issues because we ordered a bunch of stuff and we didn't know it was happening. It was just one of those happy coincidences. So, but then supply issues started happening, and we used to be able to get like a container from China to the US in like 3 weeks or so, and then it doubled, and then it
Right.
tripled, and then the price quadrupled. And so yeah, I mean that really hasn't eased up. I think at last check we shaved a week off of the astronomically long time it takes for a
But the
container.
pricing,
Yeah, the pricing is still a problem.
this is something I can't get people to understand. They think that with video cards, it's all the companies and the sellers. And the sellers, I'm not going to say they haven't done a part. And I'm going to stay away from if the companies have because I like my job. Anyway, but you look at the especially in electronics, the cost to manufacture is up something like 60% for small components. Yeah. So you've got to add that into the cost to produce a video card. Then you've got to add tripling or quadrupling the cost of transport to get this stuff into the U.S. You add an extended pipeline of time to get the stuff here. And oh, by the way, when it gets here, since it's from China, 20-25% tariff on top of all of that.
Imagine if you made something 5 or 6 times the size of a graphics card, like cases.
Oh, good. Well, you'd have supply issues, and this
the
is
cost per unit just skyrockets.
Well, yeah, this is what people don't understand. The reason we use ships to transport is because ships measure how you ship in volume less than weight. So when you've got a small volume item like a GPU or a CPU or a keyboard or a mouse, you can pack that container. You can put just gobs of stuff in that container. Where with cases, you're not going to quite get as many in there. because you've got a bigger volume you have to fill.
Yeah.
But that's why the industry for all of this ships by ship. And because people are like, oh, but you don't need that much space. You could stick 1,000 video cards on a plane. Yes, you could. But the cost would be about 20 times higher still.
Yeah.
It's a mess. It is a mess. So, all right, one more thing before we get off here, because you and I started to do this before the show. You are playing Elden Ring.
I am.
And
playing is being generous.
You are suffering through Elden Ring.
Failing at Elden Ring.
And this is something I've been looking at, because I tried it. To me, the Twitch element, I'm not a big fan of RPGs where you have to constantly be hitting different keys to roll and to dodge and to duck.
Yeah.
I'm because I guess as you get older, the reflexes go. I like the old school turn-based RPGs. And forget the modern stuff. Let's go back and talk about the stuff that really, to me, started the RPG craze in computers. The gold box edition stuff, like Eye of the Beholder, Pools of Radiance. These moved into Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter Nights. These to me were amazing RPGs. They were just great story, fun to play. You got the party experience even in solo play. Because again, that's what to me always made a great RPG was that party experience. And then you've got some modern games that are doing this. What are your thoughts? Do you like the shooter element that's kind of snuck into the RPG community?
So we definitely have a diverging tastes in
that's
our
okay.
RPGs. So my first, I kind of started with the turn-based RPGs, and I always preferred a more immersive experience. Like one of the things I love about RPGs is just kind of like visiting a fantasy realm and kind of feeling like you're in that world as much as possible. So I tended to gravitate more towards the first person style RPGs. And we talk a lot about Bethesda's approach to that with like Elder Scrolls. Definitely loved the Elder Scrolls games. Morrowind was probably my favorite game of all time. But even earlier than that, I think the first taste of those style games that I ever had was games called King's Field and Shadow Tower. I think those were on PlayStation 2 or the original Playstation.
Yeah, I didn't play either of those.
Yeah, so, and you don't hear people talking about them because they were pretty bad.
Well, I don't mind some of it. Skyrim, I love Skyrim. Mm-hmm. I had a blast playing Skyrim. Some of those games aren't too bad, but it seems like more and more of them have moved in the same direction Elden Ring has moved, where it's really Twitch-based. Mm. And you're kind of experiencing this from what you told me, right? That it's a little more twitchy?
Yeah. Well, it's a Dead Souls game, basically, or Dark Souls, rather. Sorry.
Dead Souls applies.
So it's funny. Back when I was at CPU Magazine, I actually reviewed the Dark Souls game, and it was one of those games I did not like. I would play like 10 minutes of it and be like, "This is not for me." However, it was assigned to me, and I had to review it, and I had to play the game, and I was like, "Oh, this is gonna suck." And it's the thing is, you get these games, and they're an instant turnoff almost for those. Maybe I'm too old. I have kids. I don't have a whole lot of time to dedicate to gaming, and so that's part of my
I get that
struggle. So when I do sit down, I don't want to be at level 1 and feel like I'm in an RPG for 10 hours. But these games are definitely like, oh, wait till hour 15 and then it gets good. And that's kind of a bit much. But however, once you do get to that level where you're like, okay, there's this gameplay loop. You've got this Xbox controller, I mean, and it's really annoying. It is a port. This game is so obviously a port. They if you're using keyboard mouse, it'll say press A or press B
Oh,
to
that's
exit
bad.
menus.
I hate when
And
they do that.
I'm staring at my keyboard. I'm like, do I really press B? No, B doesn't do anything. So actually, Q on the keyboard is B in Elden Ring. And so it's really frustrating. Like navigating menus. Like I first launched the game, and I went to check my resolution and my settings, and I couldn't get out of the menu because it said press B to leave the menu, and escape key didn't work. And so finally, I'm just like, well, maybe it's the Q key, and that was it. But I did have to Alt F4 the first time just to get out of the game.
When
But
when I was doing reviews and doing video games, one of the things I always talked about was the first 30 minutes of gameplay are vital to a video game, and they tend to get ignored because every reviewer wants to finish the game. The reason I say the first 30 minutes are vital is if you can't capture the attention of the player and get them excited about the game in the first 30 minutes, you're not going to get them to play for 20 hours.
that's one of the things that almost surprises me about this series of games is it doesn't do that. They
It
do not.
doesn't. It's lousy
They
at that.
punish you. They punish you, and it's a little bit of an old school game in that way, where like if those old school arcade games were the same way, they were designed to eat your quarters. Um, and so it does a little bit feel like that. They're not going to hold your hand. They don't tell you where to go next. The way you find out you went the wrong way is you hit an enemy that just obliterates you, and you're like, "Oop, went the wrong way." So go a different way. That's how you learn in this game, and it's like it's very much. It actually reminds me of Minecraft in a little back when I first played Minecraft, and like, man, I want to say like 2009 or something was. Man, that game is old.
It's been a while.
So back in an alpha of Minecraft, you knew nothing. There was nothing. I mean, you had to go to a wiki to find out how to play the game. But that's what I loved about that game is I didn't open the wiki for the first 10 hours, and I was just like, I'm punching a tree now. Something's happening. That there's this real discovery that I feel like this game, if you're not up for some punishment, and if you don't want your handheld, or if you need your handheld, you're not going to like this game.
Well, I don't mind the not holding my hand, but if I'm playing the game for the first time and I'm not doing anything stupid, I'm playing the game and it's punishing me. That to me isn't fun. I don't mind a game that you did something stupid, you're dead. That's fine. I don't mind that. I don't mind a game that makes you play to the best of your ability to play.
Mm-hmm.
But this isn't the same thing. This, like you said, it's actively punishing you in the early stages of the game. That was the turnoff for me. I know there are a lot of people that are excited about this game. I'm just not one of them.
So yeah, and I'm not trying to convince you to give the game a try. But what it boils down to is, if you persevere, because you have to realize there are lots of people playing this game, and
There are.
and I've got friends on my Steam friend list who are getting achievements. I still haven't gotten a single achievement for 8 hours. This is very unusual. So other people have figured out. Am I doing something wrong? Let's learn about this. And it's like, maybe I just need to level up. And that's what it kind of boils down to is you need to level up. It's very grindy, which is again a bit of a turnoff. But the thing is, once you approach something, once you hit that wall and you just feel like utterly defeated, and then a couple hours later you come to that wall and you tear it down, it's a rather unique feeling that you don't get in a whole lot of games. Is this, wow, I actually feel like I kind of did something. I accomplished something. So I think that's the real hook with this game is like, you have to be good. We're not gonna babysit you. It's not gonna be easy. This boss that is the first like real boss
Yes.
that you see, you're not gonna get to that guy until 4 or 5 hours into the game. So
Yeah,
he's gonna just stand in your way, and you got to figure it out.
I've played enough that I know I don't like it. And I think the important thing to tell people is this: take the number of people playing this game into perspective. So I just looked on Steam. Right now, they're up near 100,000 people have played the game so far today. Okay, well, I think that's the peak player base today, was near 100,000. 100,000 people's a lot of people. I'm not disputing that. Steam is what, daily in the 30 million range?
Mm-hmm.
So again, 100,000 people, when you look at that from a percentage perspective, not as many people as you think playing it. So, but that's what I love about PC gaming. There's something for everybody.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, it's been an hour, dude.
Wow, that went fast.
It did. Well, it always goes fast when you and I get to hang out. It goes too fast. If any of you haven't done it yet, NetWar, Omaha, Nebraska, early April. I can't remember the date, but you will be there, right?
I will. We will be sponsoring that. Kind of in the process of figuring out what we're going to give away, but I will be there and I will have some cool computers to show off. So yeah, it should be lots of fun.
And Sapphire sponsoring the event as well. We're going to send a couple of video cards and some cool swag.
Okay, cool.
All right. Thank you, Andrew, for taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks, Ed.
All right, you guys, and we will see you next month with another Sapphire Nation podcast. And we're out, 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 and we're out.